Oh, good morning, and it's me, Kenny Polcari, your host of the party, and today is Tuesday, June 7th, 2022, and as you can see, the windows are still all wet because it is very humid outside in Florida now as we enter, as I said to you yesterday, the hurricane season, which is a very humid time of the year. In any event, the day is just beginning. What is it that you need to know? What happened yesterday, what's happening today, and what's happening down the road? That's going to keep you focused. So markets are churning ahead of the Friday CPI report, right? 10-year Treasury yields did top 3%, actually yielding as high as 3.04% yesterday. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Bojo, right, Boris Johnson, survived the vote of no confidence, but just by a whisker. Oil continues to march higher, taking gas along with it as we enter the summer driving season. And what are we having for dinner tonight? We're having the classic meat sauce with spaghetti and meatballs. Delicious. Okay, it was a relatively quiet day on Monday. No eco data, no earnings data, no drama. Stocks opened high and managed to remain in positive territory all day. At 4 p.m., the Dow was up 16 points. The S&P added 12. The NASDAQ gained 48. The Russell added 6. And the transports were up 110 points. The 10-year Treasury surging up and through 3%. Oil kissing $120 a barrel. The Fed voting members have gone into hiding, otherwise known as the blackout period, ahead of the FOMC meeting, which is next Wednesday. And that's the time, between now and then where they can't say anything, although you could get the non-voting members out there. And like I said, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson survived the vote of no confidence just by the hair on his chin. Now, there was no economic data yesterday for anyone to focus on, so much of the conversation was around last Friday's non-farm payroll report and what it means versus this Friday's CPI, Consumer Price Index report, and what it will mean. As many of the street analysts, economists are now speculating about what the Fed will do in the coming months. Because to be fair, the Fed is set to raise rates by 50 base points next week and 50 again in July. What is unclear is what happens in September, November, and December. And since Friday is really the only day this week that matters because of the very important CPI report, I suspect that we will see more churn until we get that report, until it's clearer what the CPI numbers reveal. Now, I told you yesterday that the official estimate suggests that CPI is going to decline, which again makes zero sense to me because April's PPI, Producer Price Index, was higher, again on top of the higher reports for March, February, and January. And then go back into last year. And we know that higher prices at the producer level filter their way down to the consumer level over a period of about 6 weeks. So by all that line of thinking, CPI can only go up as it has for the last 12 months, unless, of course, someone in the accounting department at the state level makes it go down in order to support their story that inflation is peaking. I mean, you got to laugh out loud thinking about that, because how can that possibly? I mean, don't tell me that never happens, right? Come on. It does happen. Somebody kind of fudges the numbers to make it fit the narrative. In addition, we have to start a new chapter in the Lonnie Musk Twitter drama. In this chapter, Lonnie sent a letter to Chief Legal Officer Vijaya Gade, I think is how you pronounce his name, demanding that they release the necessary information regarding the number of spam fake accounts on the platform or risk having the deal fail. Because up until now, they have not provided that information. In fact, the letter states that they have refused to provide the data necessary for him to facilitate his own analysis, right? It goes on to say, and I quote, "This is a clear material breach of Twitter's obligations under the merger agreement, and Mr. Musk reserves all rights resulting therefrom, including his right not to consummate the transaction and his right to terminate the merger agreement." Oh boy. And that caused investors and traders to bail, sending the stock down another 5.5% on the opening bell. Understand that the deal was struck at $54.20, right? A rich bid for sure back in April when the company was trading at $39 a share. After the agreement, the stock traded up to the low 50s, suggesting that most of the arb guys were betting that the deal gets done and that the time value of money was playing out just as it should. Versus pushing the stock above the deal price, which would suggest that the price was too low. Clearly, that's not the issue. But the doubts started immediately. Members of Congress opining on the legality of it, while others started whining about the threats to free speech, which is really comical because that's exactly why Lonnie Musk is going after it, in order to maintain free speech. But that's a whole nother conversation that we can discuss at a later time. In the last 6 weeks, the price of Twitter has actually declined by 30% as details of the deal and concerns were raised, taking it back to the pre-deal levels of $39.56 a share in a move that now suggests the deal doesn't get done at the deal price, resulting either in a revised bid or suggesting that the deal doesn't get done at all, meaning no bid. And add fuel to the fire, the human versus bot argument is now under investigation by the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is now questioning those same fake accounts, saying that the company falsely reported its fake bots in violation of the Texas Deceptive Trade Practices Act. The investigation notes that Texans rely on Twitter's public statement that nearly all of the users are real people. It goes on to say that regular Texans rely on the veracity of its claims, but so do Texas businesses and advertisers who are using Twitter for their livelihoods. The outcome of this drama is no longer guaranteed. So sit tight, sit back, grab the popcorn, because if Ken is right, think of the other states that could make the same argument, and then think of that drama series that Netflix could create. I mean, it would be enough to challenge the very successful Yellowstone drama series, which is sweeping the nation. U.S. futures are lower this morning in what looks like another risk-off day. And in fact, the market is now open and stocks are lower as investors woke up this morning and decided that the risk remains elevated, keeping the story alive that one day it's good, the next day, not so much. Right? At 6 o'clock this morning, Dow futures, they were all lower. Now the market is open. The Dow is down 272 points at the moment. The S&P, NASDAQ, and Russell and transports are all lower as well. Oil was a bit higher again this morning, trading at 119.50 before backing off just a little bit to trade as low as 118.25. Calls for U.S. energy independence are now starting to ring louder and louder. But if anyone thinks that the oil companies are suddenly going to start new projects, you should rethink that. Why? Because the administration has launched an energy war in this country. They have made it clear that fossil fuels have no place in the American dream. So tell me, why would any of the big energy companies spend the time and money, billions of dollars in infrastructure to pump and refine more oil when the left is screaming about climate change and ESG mandates and the push to go wind, water, and solar? To be clear, these are the same companies, energy companies, are investing money in clean energy at the expense of fossil fuels. But clean energy is not anywhere near close to filling the gap, and fossil fuels are being branded as the bad guy. So you can't have it both ways at the moment. Clean energy is still decades away from powering the country, never mind the world. So someone has to be the adult in the room and take charge if we really want energy independence in the United States that they're all starting to scream about. Very interesting. 2 years ago, they didn't want energy independence. Now they're screaming about it with gasoline at $10 a gallon in California. 10-year treasuries are yielding 3.01% this morning, but should remain above the 3% now and going forward as the Fed readies to raise rates. Unless, of course, they can spin the CPI story, suggesting that the Fed has won the war on inflation, which would really be a fairy tale, and looks to pause, something that has been debunked the last week. Look, rising yields only add to the worries about the risk to economic growth as global central banks tighten policy. We have talked about this. This is not new. Nobody should be surprised. I suspect and have been saying that there will be continued back and forth with the path of least resistance lower over the next couple of months as investors and portfolio managers attempt to find clarity, a sense of direction, and whether or not the Fed can manage to even navigate a soft landing, which I don't think they can, but let's just wait and see. To be clear, though, lower does not necessarily mean a collapse. I still believe that 3,800 is a level of real support and will only change my mind if the fundamental story about the economy and the Fed changes over the next couple of weeks, meaning they get much more aggressive than they're currently suggesting. European markets are also a bit lower, down about 0.7% across the board. European investors also waiting on the US CPI data for Friday, which may give them a clue about what the European Central Bank might have up its sleeve in the weeks ahead. Remember, inflation across the zone has surged to all-time highs, and the ECB continues to stimulate, something that I think that I expect to see is going to end on Thursday when the ECB makes their latest announcement about policy and policy decisions. The S&P closed last night at 41.21 and remains in the very tight trading range of 40.75, 41.75. This morning's action suggests that we could test lower again, and as many tell us the worst is over and that the bottom is in. I'm not so sure I believe that. I'm just not convinced yet. So I remain on the cautious side of the equation. Expect this week to be all about the speculation around the CPI and the Consumer Confidence Report, which is expected to come in at 58.3, which is flat month over month. We remain in the broader trend line support resistance range of 3,800 on the downside, 42.75 on the upside. Okay, so what do we have for dinner tonight? Well, we're going to make spaghetti and meatballs. Why? Because it's comfort food and it always makes you feel so good and it fills your belly, and you can make this meal for not a lot of money and feed a lot of people, right? It's an economical meal, like I said, that feeds a big family, right? You should be able to do this. You should be able to feed a family of 4 and have leftovers with about $50 in your pocket to make this meal. So for this, you're going to need the meat sauce, right? So for that, you need 4 chicken thighs with the skin on, 4 country-style pork ribs, nice and thick. You need onions, garlic, olive oil, salt, and pepper. You need 4 cans of crushed tomatoes. Actually, 3 cans of crushed tomatoes, not puree. Kitchen-ready crushed tomatoes, and you need fresh basil. Now you want to slice the 3 large white onions, chop 4 cloves of garlic. You want to saute that in a heavy bottom pot, medium-high. After about 5 minutes, you want to add the chicken thighs and brown those for about 15 minutes with the skin on, right? It's the skin that adds the flavor. Then remove the thighs after about 15 minutes and put them in a bowl and put them on the side. Now add the country ribs to the pot, brown these for about 15 minutes, remove those then and set aside. Now add the 3 cans of kitchen-ready crushed tomatoes. If you can't find them, buy the plum tomatoes and then run them through the food processor. You can add about 1.5 cans of water. You can always add more, but add about 1.5 cans of water. Bring it to a boil. Then once it boils, turn it down to simmer, season it with salt and pepper, add the fresh chopped basil, like 6 or 8 leaves, add back all the meat, the chicken, the pork, and the meatballs, which we're going to make in a minute. Add in the oil from the meatballs that you fried it in, let it simmer for at least 45 minutes or an hour, stirring it occasionally. At this point, it's done. But then if you want to turn it off, let it cool, put it in the refrigerator overnight, because the next day, it's always better. Okay, now the meatballs. For this, you cannot use lean beef. Absolutely not. You're wasting good money, right? Because they're going to taste like cardboard. You need ground chuck. You need at least 75-25, meaning 75% lean, 25% fat. Okay, now that we get that, you can also add, and if you want, you can mix it. You can do the ground chuck, you can do ground pork and ground veal. You can mix them all together. You can use just one or the other. You can just use the meat, the ground chuck if you want. I always use 1 pound of ground chuck and 1 pound of ground pork, right? 2 eggs, salt and pepper, a handful or 2 of the grated Parmigiana cheese. If you have Romano, that's fine. You need 2 medium cloves of crushed and minced garlic, 2 slices of Italian bread soaked in whole milk, and a splash of olive oil, right? I tell you, there's no need to add salt because the cheese will provide it, but you should probably add just a little bit of salt, not too much. Now, wash your hands. Now you're going to make the meatballs. You want to make them bigger than a golf ball, but smaller than a baseball, right? Next, I fry my meatballs, and then I put them in the sauce. You can also place them on a baking sheet and bake them in a high oven for 15 or 20 minutes on 350 degrees, and then add them to the sauce. And if you're in a rush, you can just make them and put them in raw. Just drop them in the sauce because they'll cook fine, right? Either way, I just prefer to have them fried because I think they have a different flavor. And then you take the the oil from the fried meatballs and you add that to the sauce. Oh my God. Once you have the sauce, you can use it for a number of pasta and parmigiana dishes. Today, it's all about spaghetti and meatballs. Tomorrow, I'm going to bring you the baked rigatoni. Later in the week, I'm going to bring you eggplant parmigiana, chicken, veal, or even pork cutlet parmigiana. It is delicious. Yum, yum, yum. In any event, the day has started. The markets are open. The markets are lower. There is some pressure brewing. So don't be surprised. Until tomorrow, take good care.